She believed she had won when she left him behind. Poor, invisible, with no future. But fate does not forget broken hearts. Years later, standing at that same door, Sophia encountered a gaze that burned like fire. The gaze of the man who had once begged for her love, and now had the power to reject her. And what happened next? No one could have predicted. If this story touches your heart, leave a like. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you are hearing this message from. It's your support that brings every story told here to life. There was something in the air that afternoon that William could never forget. Maybe it was the warm late summer wind dancing through the leaves in the square, or the light jasmine perfume she wore, always her. So beautiful, so impossible. But most of all, there was that look, cold, calculated, devoid of any trace of affection. Sophia watched him with her arms crossed and her chin slightly raised, as if she were carrying the world in her hands and deciding to let it fall. "William, you need to understand," she began, her voice too calm for someone about to break a heart. "Love isn't enough. Never has been. Never will be." He swallowed hard. His fingers trembled, even as he tried to hide them in his pants pockets. He had memorized what he wanted to say, going over it 1,000 times in his mind, like someone rehearsing their last chance. But in front of her, everything crumbled. "But we love each other, Sophia. Isn't that enough?" His voice was low, broken, like a silent plea for her to feel what she once felt again. She looked away, as if the mere mention of the word love bothered her. "What we have is beautiful, William, but it doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't build a future. I'm tired of living on promises." She looked at him then, serious, and it was like being slapped. "I won't give up the life I deserve for a boy with no stability, no name, no nothing." With each word, something inside him died. Sophia, the same girl who smiled on her old bicycle through the cobblestone streets, who laughed out loud in the freezing early mornings, who said she preferred sincere hugs to expensive jewelry, now spoke like a stranger, as someone who had learned to measure the value of love with the ruler of convenience. "So that was it?" William whispered. "All this time meant so little to you." She hesitated. For a brief moment, her eyes wavered. There was a hint of pain there, but pride prevailed and it did. "But I grew up. And you didn't. You still dream of a world where love conquers all. I've learned that the real world is quite different." William lowered his head. He felt the weight of failure settle on his shoulders. He felt small, ridiculous, as if he'd believed in a fantasy that existed only for him. "And that ring?" he asked, his voice almost hoarse. "That night at the gazebo, when you said you'd choose me even if the world were at your feet." Sophia smiled, not tenderly, but condescendingly. "I was a foolish girl, deluded. Today, I understand what really matters." The silence that followed was suffocating, a heavy silence that said more than any scream. William looked at her one last time, memorizing every feature, the curve of her chin, the cold glint in her eyes, the perfectly painted lips, and the invisible wall that now existed between them. He didn't beg. He didn't insist. Deep down, he knew that any more words would only serve to humiliate him further. She had already chosen. And it wasn't him. He took a step back, then another, until you turn your back. Sound of his own footsteps on the sidewalk seemed louder than usual. The world around him went on. Cars passed. Children played in the distance. Life went on, but inside him, everything had stopped. He walked until he disappeared around the bend in the street, without looking back. And in that instant, something inside him broke completely. Sophia stood there for a few more minutes. She took a deep breath. She shoved her hands into her expensive bag and headed in the opposite direction, her heels clicking firmly on the stone floor. But there was one thing even she couldn't avoid, the slight tremor in her fingers. Because even when you choose with reason, the heart feels. William left town that same week. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. He didn't make a fuss. It just disappeared. Many said he couldn't bear the shame, that he fled because of wounded pride. Others said he had left to try his luck elsewhere, like so many others who dream big and end up returning empty-handed. But no one knew the truth. No one knew about the pain he carried in his chest like a constant weight. No one heard the nights he screamed into his pillow, trying to erase from his mind the sound of her voice, telling him he was nothing. But as the world forgot his name, he made a silent promise. One day, she would hear a knock on the door, and he would be on the other side, not like the poor, passionate boy he once was, but as a man who knew how to transform pain into strength. And he swore to himself that when that day came, there would be no mercy in his eyes. The years passed with the silent haste of someone who waits for no one but William. He didn't just survive time. He used it as fuel when he left. He took almost nothing, just a backpack, some change and a broken heart. But inside that broken chest was something stronger than any rejection. A purpose. It wasn't about revenge, at least not at first. It was about proving himself, about never again letting anyone look at him the way she did, as if he were worthless. It was difficult. The first few months in another city were hard and lonely. He slept in cramped quarters and worked longer hours than his body could handle. He was a delivery man by day, a cleaner by night, a porter by night. Every penny he saved was a seed, and while others rested, he studied. He absorbed everything. He read books on business, finance, leadership, and overcoming obstacles. He nourished his mind with the same rigor with which he sustained his weary body. William discovered a hunger he had never known, not for food, but for transformation. One night, sitting on a random bench, he was leafing through an entrepreneurship book he'd found in a used bookstore. The words seemed to speak directly to him. You don't have to be born big. You just have to refuse to die small. He closed his eyes and saw her face, Sophia. It still hurt, but the pain was no longer an open wound. It was a memory, a scar that reminded him of where he came from and where he never wanted to return. It was there that he decided he would open his own company. It started small, like everything true, a modest logistics business, fast shipping, efficient deliveries, impeccable service. William treated each client as if they were his only one. He worked behind the scenes with obsession. He slept little, ate poorly, but each new goal achieved lit a flame within him. In 2 years, he doubled the size of his team. In 5, he was a benchmark in the industry, invested in technology, expanded branches, and diversified services. And more than that, he became an admired leader, someone who listened and valued people. The pain he carried had made him more empathetic, more human. People said, he's brilliant. Others murmured, no one climbs that fast without luck. But no one saw what was behind it. Sleepless nights, calloused hands, tears swallowed in silence. William now wore tailored suits, signed million-dollar contracts, and attended events he had previously only seen on television. But inside, he was still the same man who cried alone in that square years ago. He just didn't allow anyone to see it anymore. His name began to circulate among major investors. Magazines have chosen him as one of the businessmen of the year. Invited to speak, to inspire, to teach, and little by little the invisible boy became impossible to ignore. And Sophia, he never saw her again. He didn't look for her, but sometimes he wondered if she had ever heard of him. If the name William R. Lancaster, now a symbol of power and success, caused any reaction in her, a shiver, a memory, a regret. But soon he pushed the thoughts away. He allowed himself to think about her for a few seconds, just enough to remember who she was and why she fought. He learned to keep his pain enclosed. Draws, it was one autumn morning that everything began to change. William arrived at a luxurious corporate event at a 5-star hotel, wearing a dark suit, a firm gaze, and impeccable posture. His presence effortlessly dominated the room. He didn't need to speak loudly to be noticed. He didn't need to prove anything. The way others greeted him said it all. Reporter approached him. Mr. Lancaster, how does it feel to have reached the top? William smiled at the corner of his mouth. A restrained, almost ironic smile. The top is a lonely place, but I prefer solitude to being remembered as someone who gave up halfway. The cameras recorded. The flashes flashed, but what no one saw was what happened moments later. In the main hall he walked in, prepared for another night of speeches, toasts, and unfamiliar faces, until a face froze him. There she was, Sophia, years later, in the same environment he never imagined he would find her. And no, She didn't look like the woman he'd left behind. She was stunning, yes. Elegant as always, but there was something more. A restlessness in his gaze, a melancholic air between polite smiles, and when her eyes met his, the world seemed to stop. There was no music, no words, just that moment, in which two pasts collided with the force of everything that was left unsaid. William maintained his posture. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, but the heart. It wavered, just for a second. Would she come closer? Would you pretend you didn't see him? Would you ask for forgiveness or feign pride? He didn't know, but what he knew, with absolute certainty, was that for the first time, he was the one in control, and that was just the beginning. Ethi, Grand Elyssee's main ballroom, gleamed in hues of gold and crystal. Imposing chandeliers hung from the ceiling like silent crowns, and the refined sound of a string quartet filled the room with lightness and sophistication. It was one of those evenings made to impress, where luxury overflowed in every detail, and smiles were almost always just well-practiced masks. Sophia walked among the guests with practiced elegance. She wore a long black satin gown that hugged her body with precision. Her hair was tied back in a classic bun, her neck bare, revealing only a pair of subtle diamond earrings. In everyone's eyes, she was untouchable, strong, flawless, but inside, there was an emptiness that time had not been able to fill. She smiled, chatted, toasted, but none of it truly reached her. For years, she'd lived surrounded by appearances, cold relationships, and promises that always came with conditions. What once seemed like the ideal future now revealed itself as a gilded prison. It was then, between a glass of champagne and an uninteresting conversation with a European businessman, that she saw him, William. Time has stopped, literally. Nothing else seemed to move, just that man walking across the room, as if the world recognized him before she even understood what she was seeing. He wore a tailored dark suit, his shoulders square, his steps sure, his gaze steady. But there was something deeper, something the expensive clothes couldn't explain. Presence. William had become a man who commanded respect simply by being there, not through arrogance, but through the quiet strength of someone who had faced hell and come back stronger. Sophia's heart raced without her permission. Her breath faltered, and for an instant, she felt exactly what she'd felt years ago. The chill, the heat in her chest, the fear of losing herself in that gaze. But now it was different. Now, she was the one who didn't know how to behave in front of him. His eyes found her in the crowd, and what followed was a deafening silence. They looked at each other, at length, intensely, as if everything that had been left, unsaid in recent years, had slipped away in that single moment. She saw pain, he saw repentance. She tried to smile, but didn't know how. He kept his expression restrained, as if he were observing an ancient work, beautiful, but no longer moving in the same way. Sophia took 2 hesitant steps toward him, and each step felt like a test, as if the ground beneath her feet were asking permission to take her there. "William," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He just watched her silently, and when he finally spoke, his voice was deep, calm, firm. "It's been a while." "Sophia." There was something cutting in the simplicity of that sentence, as if each word were measured to convey no emotion. But the eyes, the eyes said otherwise. She swallowed hard. "You changed." He smiled slightly, an almost ironic smile. "That's what they say." There was a brief silence between them, too heavy for comfort. The room continued to vibrate around them. Laughter, toasts, footsteps. But they were in another time, another world. A world made only of memories. "I've heard about you," she continued. "So your company, at your name. You've become someone important." "It's funny, isn't it?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "I only became someone after I stopped being nobody." She felt the blow. And she deserved it. "I never wanted to hurt you." He tried to justify. He laughed short, without humor, but it hurt. She lowered her gaze. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to say. Sophia, always so eloquent, so articulate, was now just a woman before the man she had once loved and abandoned. "Are you okay?" she asked, even though she knew how obvious and absurd the question sounded. William stared at her intensely. His eyes seemed to pierce her soul, sifting through the rubble, the memories, the regrets. "I'm alive," he replied. "And you?" Sophia hesitated. She thought about lying, about saying she was happy, fulfilled. But for some reason, he couldn't, not always. He murmured. The answer hung in the air like an unplanned confession. He looked at her less coldly, but still with a distance, like someone who understands, but doesn't forget. "I have to go," he said, stepping aside. "It was good to see you." "William," she called impulsively. "Can we talk? Another day, perhaps?" He watched her for a second longer than necessary. "Maybe," he replied, "but only if it's a real conversation. No masks." And then he walked away. Sophia stood there motionless. The sound of the string quartet seemed louder, more painful. The lights, once golden and soft, now seemed blinding. She sat in the corner of the room, alone, with the cup in hand and the heart between the fingers, and for the first time in years, he felt something real, something she believed. She had lost, or worse, thrown away William. Across the room didn't look back, but inside, his chest was at war. He was no longer the same man, but was she still the same woman? And what would he do with everything he still felt, despite everything? The days that followed their reunion were not normal for either of them. William tried to stay focused, meetings, decisions, contracts, but there was something that insisted on invading his thoughts at the most. At appropriate moments, Sophia's gaze, that mixture of regret and desire, her voice low, trembling, unlike the coldness he remembered. It was as if a door he thought had been locked forever had cracked open, and now, no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, he couldn't close it. Sophia, in turn, felt that something had stirred inside her. It was as if that brief encounter had torn a veil that she herself had spent years sewing together. Everything that had happened after. William suddenly seemed insipid. The men, the parties, the compliments. Everything seemed like an empty echo. Next to his presence, she knew she couldn't just show up. She couldn't barge into the life of a man who had moved on and clearly didn't need her, but fate, as always, seemed ready to play irony. It was a charity cocktail party in support of a children's foundation. William was one of the main investors. Sophia, invited by a senator's wife, didn't even know he would be there until he saw him again. He stood at the side of the stage, listening attentively to the institution's director's speech. The soft light of the hall fell on his face with natural elegance. His suit was impeccable, his hands clasped in front of him, his gaze fixed and yet completely at ease, a man who knew who he was. And that, ironically, made her forget who she was when she looked at him. This time, he was the one who noticed her presence first. He turned his face and saw Sophia. A wine-colored dress draped her body with subtle sensuality. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. Her eyes sought his with a mixture of hesitation and surrender. For an instant, no one else existed. The speech continued. The applause came and went. But they were both stuck there, in a look that said everything their lips dared not repeat. When the ceremony ended, she approached, her steps slow, almost unsteady, but he didn't back down. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said with a tight smile. "Me neither, but lately, the unexpected encounters have been the most revealing." She laughed softly. A nervous but sincere laugh. "We can talk?" This time he didn't hesitate. They sat in a more private area, where the lights were lower and the music was a whisper in the background. She stirred her wineglass without drinking. He watched her every move closely, trying to figure out who this new Sophia before him was. Say if she was a reinvented version, or just the same woman now without shields. "William, I don't want to force anything," she began. I needed to say that after last time. A lot of things came to mind." "Like what?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. She took a deep breath. "Like how cruel I was, how cowardly I was, and how, even after everything, seeing you again affected me in a way I didn't expect." There was silence, a dense silence, where desire and anger seemed to measure each other in silence, like two opposing forces within the same body. "You know what's weird?" he said finally. "Even after everything that happened, When you walked into that room, I felt the same chill down my spine as I did years ago, as if my body still recognized you, even when my mind screams to forget you." She looked at him, surprised. And in that instant, the mask fell. They were both there, vulnerable, human, and then, as if an invisible thread were pulling them, the bodies subtly tilted. They haven't touched each other. Not yet, but they were dangerously close. Her scent invaded his senses. A sweet, familiar perfume that carried memories he pretended not to hold. Her fingers lightly touched the side of the glass, but they were trembling, and his eyes were fixed on her lips. It was quick, but intense, a touch of hands as they picked up the same bottle, a whispered apology, an awkward smile, but in that touch, there was something, an old heat, familiar almost, unbearable. The chemistry exploded like a spark that had been suppressed for too long. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was a visceral connection. It was the reunion of two bodies that had known each other in silence, in their youth, and now recognized each other with maturity and urgency. "This shouldn't be happening," she murmured, almost as a warning to herself. William moved closer. Their faces were now only inches apart. His breath brushed her face, and her eyes trembled. "But it is." She closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, she saw something in him she hadn't expected. Tenderness, not anger, not pride, tenderness. And that disarmed her. They didn't kiss, not yet, but something had changed forever in that instant. Later, when they returned to the main hall, they tried to act normally, but they were no longer the same. Every time their eyes met, the air felt thin. Every time their arms almost touched as they walked, it was as if their bodies were asking for more, and even without words, they knew that their reunion wasn't over yet, because there was something bigger going on, something they couldn't avoid. And the question in the air was simple and devastating: who would give in first? The night of their reunion lingered on Sophia's skin like an old perfume that refuses to fade. Every restrained gesture, every look laden with everything unsaid. It was impossible to forget. But what bothered her most wasn't what she felt. It was what she saw. William had changed. Not just on the outside, in his mature features, refined clothes, or powerful presence, but on the inside, there was a new silence about him. A kind of calm that hid tension, strength that seemed to have been forged in the fire of pain, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. In the following days, Sophia summoned the courage to send a message. A timid attempt to resume the conversation, interrupted by pent-up desire. William responded politely, but without enthusiasm, sure. "We can talk," without an exclamation point, without emojis, without commas. It was enough for her to understand that, although he had looked at her intensely, he was still far away. They arranged to meet at a discreet coffee shop, away from the center. No luxury, no appearances. William suggested the place. She got the message. He arrived first. He was already seated, with a half-empty cup of coffee, and his eyes fixed on the street outside the window. When she approached, he looked up, but not his body. "You came," he said. "I told you I would come," she replied, sitting down with slight hesitation. There was a brief silence, broken only by the sound of William's spoon swirling in his coffee. "You know what's weird?" he began, not looking directly at her. "I spent years trying not to feel anything. And now you show up, and it's like everything's here again." She swallowed hard. I feel that way too. "But there's a difference," he continued, now looking at her. "You lived your life with choices made for comfort. I lived with consequences made for pain." Sophia looked away. He wasn't being cruel, just honest. "William, I know I hurt you, but I never imagined your life would be so lonely." He smiled at the corner of his mouth. A sad smile. "Do you know what's hardest when you're rejected for being not enough? It's not the rejection. It's everything it says, even without words. It's the echo of 'you're not enough,' hammering on good days and screaming on bad days. You learn not to trust, not even those who say they love you, not even those who smile back." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. It was as if she were listening to the wreckage of what she herself had helped build. "But you won," he said, his tone almost hopeful. "You became everything I never imagined I would ever let slip away." Winning doesn't undo what was lost along the way, he replied bluntly. Success came, yes, but it came accompanied by nights alone, by toasting glasses alone, by promises made only to myself. She placed her hand on the table, close to his but didn't touch him. The gesture was more of a request than a movement. I never stopped to think about what that did to you. Really, I only saw what I thought I deserved. I was so focused on security, on image, on acceptance, that I lost the only thing that made me feel truly alive. William watched her, silent. His eyes no longer held anger, but they no longer overflowed with tenderness either. There was something different there, a quiet sadness, something only those who have suffered enough can bear. Do you know why it's hard to forgive you, Sophia? He said softly. Because when you left me, it wasn't just love you killed. You killed the man who believed in people. She felt the impact like an invisible punch, but he took a deep breath. He wouldn't run away from that pain, not this time. Then let me get to know you again, he said, his voice firm but sweet. Not to win you back, but to understand this man you've become, the man I didn't have the courage to wait for to blossom. William stared at her for a long time, long enough for her to feel her heart race and almost stop. What if I'm no longer able to trust? Then let me learn not to make mistakes with you? Again there was silence and then a slight nod. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. In the following weeks, they began to meet more frequently. No promises, no plans. She listened to him with attention, with respect, with genuine regret. And he, little by little, let out parts of himself that he had kept hidden for years. The fear of being abandoned, the difficulty of surrendering, the pain of having built an empire with hands bleeding inside. Sophia saw how hard he had fought, but he also saw how tired he still was, how success didn't cure trauma, how his heart was still walking on a minefield. She admired him more every day, not by fortune, but for the scars he hid behind his silence. And it was there in the midst of that delicate coexistence that she understood something essential. Loving William now required more courage than before, because now he knew how to live without her. And the question that remained in the air was, could she prove that she still deserved a place in his world? There was something almost dangerous in the way William was looking at Sophia. Now it wasn't hate, nor direct resentment, but it was as if he had become the silent judge of her fate, someone who, with a single word, could set her free or destroy her emotionally. Sophia felt it. As much as their conversations were softer and their smiles more frequent, there was always a thread of tension between them, something invisible, but real. It was as if William was holding a rope and deciding with each encounter whether to pull it gently or forcefully. He knew she carried guilt, saw it in her eyes every time she spoke, too sincerely. He could feel it in the tone of her voice, in the hesitant way she laughed, as if she were asking permission to be happy with him, and that, to William, was a strange kind of power, a power he never had before, and now, no matter how much he tried to deny it, that gave him pleasure. He watched everything. The way she tried to redeem herself with small gestures, the loving messages in the morning, the simple dinner invitations, as if to say, I'm not trying to impress you, I just want to be with you. And the most curious thing is that William liked it. I'd like to see her try, I wish. I knew that now she was the one who feared losing him. It was sweet, but it was also dangerous because at the same time that he felt satisfied, he also hated himself for it. I'm not that man, he muttered to himself one night, staring at his reflection in the mirror. I don't want to hurt anyone, but part of him wanted to. Part of him still remembered the nights he cried alone, of her words, of her contempt, of the door closing, and there were times when he thought, what if I made her fall in love again, only to leave her afterward, so she could feel exactly what she made him feel. The thought frightened him, but he wouldn't leave. They were in a candlelit restaurant when everything almost came to a head. Sophia was talking about an old memory of when they went to an amusement park, and she, even though she was terrified, agreed to go on the roller coaster just because he insisted. I remember your scream, William said, laughing. You looked like you were going to faint at any moment, but you held me the whole time," she replied with a nostalgic smile. And I felt safe. Even while screaming like crazy, he watched her in silence. "You made me feel safe in a way no one else has since," she finished, her voice lower, "and I was too stupid to see it at the time." William looked away for a second. It hit him because behind that phrase there was truth. Sophia looked at him gently. Without defenses, she was giving herself away, undressing emotionally, like you may never have done before. And then came the dilemma. He could use that. It could leave her even more vulnerable. I could take her to the top of hope and release her. But when her eyes shone softly, when her hand touched his lightly and warmly, a memory flashed into his mind of a long-ago night when she had held him in her arms, shivering with cold, and said, "You are my home, William, even if the whole world says you are not," and that didn't go with revenge. In the following days, William became more silent. He didn't move away, but he didn't approach with the same abandon either. It was as if he was testing himself, testing her or testing the limits of what your heart could take. Sophia noticed. "You look different," she said one Sunday afternoon as they walked through a quiet park. "You seem distant." "Maybe I am," he replied bluntly. She stopped walking. The wind ruffled her loose hair slightly. "You still haven't forgiven me, have you?" William stared at her at length. "I understand you," he said finally, "but I don't know if that's the same as forgiveness." Sophia nodded sadly. "It's okay. I just needed to hear that." "You want me to tell you it's all in the past? That it doesn't hurt anymore?" he continued, his voice firm. "But that's not how things work. Sometimes we pretend we've gotten over it, but inside we're still bleeding." She felt her eyes fill. "I bleed too, William. Every day, for everything I lost, for everything I threw away, for letting you go, and only realizing too late what you meant." He took a deep breath. His heart tightened in his chest, as if each word she said made him relive it all over again, but he wasn't ready. Not yet. "And you think I deserve the chance to fix it?" she asked, her voice breaking. William took a while to respond. "I don't know," he said, "but I know I still want to look at you. I still want to hear your voice. I still miss you, even when I try not to." She smiled through her tears. "So, maybe there's still something here." He didn't say anything. He just looked at the sky, as if trying to find an answer in the clouds that the earth doesn't offer. And in that moment, he realized maybe it wasn't about revenge, maybe it was just about learning to trust again. But trusting was the biggest challenge, because no matter how much Sophia showed true remorse, fear still lived within him, the fear that everything was just a new cycle, a disguised repetition. And that night, when William returned home and sat on the sofa in silence, staring into space, only one question echoed within him. What if, by surrendering myself again, I'm destroyed once more? It was raining heavily that night. The entire city seemed submerged in shadows and reflections, as if the world were crying along with her. Sophia drove slowly along the wet avenues, her headlights cutting through the thick fog. Her fingers trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but it wasn't from the cold, it was from what she'd decided to do. She needed to talk. She needed to open her soul, or I would never have peace. William wasn't expecting the call. When he saw her name flash on his phone screen, his first impulse was not to answer. But something in his chest, an old uneasiness, an intuition he'd never been able to ignore, made him swipe and answer. "Hi," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything is fine?" "No," she replied without hesitation. "And that's why I need to see you today." 20 minutes later, she was at his apartment door. Soaking wet, shivering, no makeup, no armor. William stared at her in surprise, his eyes taking a moment to process the scene. This wasn't the usual elegant and composed Sophia. She was a different woman, a woman struggling with something greater than pride. "Come in," he said, leading the way. She walked through the door and sat on the sofa as if collapsing, not in body, but in soul. William offered a towel, a blanket, a hot drink. She refused everything with a slight wave. "I need to speak before I lose my courage," she said without looking at him. He sat in the chair across from her. In silence, "I spent years convincing myself I made the right choice," he began, his voice cracking but firm, thinking that stability, status, and a safe life would bring me peace. I thought love was a luxury only fools allowed themselves. That I would be happy. If I had everything money could buy. She looked him in the eyes. And you know what I discovered? That I can have the most expensive apartment, the finest dinners, invitations to the most exclusive parties, and still sleep with an emptiness that consumes me inside. William remained, motionless, but something in his gaze softened. I had everything, she continued, except a genuine look, except someone who loved me for who I am, and not for the last name I carry or the dress I'm wearing. She paused, took a deep breath. When I left you, I thought I was gaining the world, but I was only losing myself. And what hurt the most was realizing too late that the world I wanted was you. William closed his eyes for a second. It hurt, because he'd dreamed those words for years. But now that they were there, naked, unprotected, he didn't know how to react. I'm not the same woman anymore. William, she said, her voice trembling, and I'm not saying this so you'll forgive me or come back to me. I'm saying it because I need to be honest. For once in my life. She stood up and walked over to him. I saw you strong, powerful, respected, but no one saw the wounds that brought you here, and I hurt you before the world even challenged you. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She held back her tears as tightly as she had held back her pride. Now it was no longer of any use. Why are you telling me all this? He asked quietly. Because even though I know I may not have a place in your life, I needed you to see me, not like that woman who left you, but like the woman who finally understands what she lost. And now he no longer wants to pretend. He's strong all the time. William stared at her in silence, and for the first time, he didn't see the woman who rejected him. He didn't see the cold, haughty, inaccessible figure. He saw Sophia, simple, fragile, human. Are you apologizing? He murmured. She laughed nervously. I'm begging you, but not for forgiveness, for real, for the chance to be who I really am. Not rich, not perfect, just me. He stood up. The distance between the two was minimal, but the tension was enormous. William looked at her face, her wet hair, her makeup-free skin, her teary eyes. She looked smaller and more beautiful than ever. You know what's strange? He said finally. I've waited years for this moment, to see you like this, without any masks. And now that it's here, I don't feel like hurting you. I feel like hugging you. She closed her eyes, and the tears finally fell. William reached out and gently pulled her close. She fit into it as if she had always belonged there. They remained like that, in silence, in the middle of the room, while the rain continued outside. There, in the warmth of that embrace, no words were needed. Because when someone reveals themselves completely, there is nothing left to say, only to feel. That night, she didn't leave. She slept on the couch, wrapped in blankets and his scent. William didn't lie down with her, but he stayed nearby in a nearby chair, watching over her barely feigned sleep. And at some point in the early morning, as he heard her breathing soften, he thought, maybe now I can see who she is, not who she was. But would his heart also be ready for what came next? It was late afternoon when Sophia returned to William's apartment. Hadn't arranged anything. There was no invitation. But there was something stronger than pride or fear, a nameless urgency. In recent days, their encounters had taken on a different tone. They were no longer about the past, they were about presence, about now. Every time she spoke, William listened. Every time he hesitated, she waited. It was as if they were building something new. Even as they walked on the ruins of what once was, she knocked on the door with trembling knuckles. He opened it almost immediately, as if he already knew it would be her. I thought maybe you were busy, Sophia said with a sheepish smile. And I would be, if you weren't who you are, William replied. Letting her in, she passed him without touching him, but the scent reached him anyway. The familiar scent of jasmine, with some woody note, the same blend that had once lingered on his pillows for weeks. At the back of the room, the light was low. William had left a trail of discreetly lit candles, not out of romantic intent, but because he had developed the habit of avoiding bright light when he wanted to think, and that night, all he wanted was to not think. "What brought you here today?" he asked, offering a glass of wine. The desire to never run away again. She took the glass, without taking her eyes off it. There was silence, but it was a heavy silence, denso, the kind of silence that precedes decisions that change everything. "I don't know if I can hold out much longer," she confessed, lowering her voice. "Resist what?" To you, William felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't respond immediately. He took a sip of wine. He took a deep breath. "I don't know if this is a good idea, Sophia," he murmured. "There are still unresolved issues between us, confused feelings, wounds. I don't want to understand anything right now," she said, stepping closer. "I just want to feel." She was a step away from him. One step, and that was all that. Separated redemption from relapse. "What if this is just neediness?" he asked, almost as a warning. "Then let it be an honest need. But let me touch you, William. Let me remind your body that it recognizes me too." He closed his eyes for a second. The old pain still lived within him. It was true, but there in front of her. Pain gave way to desire, to the magnetism that never faded. It was only covered by pride and time. "You destroyed me once," he whispered. "I don't know if I could survive another." She moved closer. Now their faces were so close that their breaths mingled. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to love you, just the way you are today, with every scar." And then, in an instant that seemed to last an eternity, their lips touched, first with hesitation, then hungry, then with everything. The kiss was not calm, it was urgent. It was an outburst from the body, a confession of the soul. It was as if years of anger, longing, and stifled words dissolved in that single gesture, and the world around disappeared. The bodies stuck together naturally. His hands explored the curve of her waist with familiarity and novelty at the same time. Her fingers crept up the back of his neck, as if seeking shelter. And there, between ardent kisses and closed gazes, William forgot all the control he tried to maintain, because at that moment, he didn't want control. I wanted to feel. He wanted to get lost, wanted to remember what it was like to truly desire someone and to be desired in return. Without reservation, she gently pushed him against the wall and laughed between kisses, as if time had gone back for a few minutes. "You still drive me crazy," she whispered breathlessly. He looked at her intensely. "And you still confuse me." She stopped, the uneven breathing, the flushed face. "Do I confuse you? Between loving you and hating you?" Sophia gently touched his face. "Then let me erase what made you hate me. Let me create new memories." He held her hand. Over his face, he kissed her calmly, and for a second, anything seemed possible. But William's mind, even drunk on touch, was still cautious. He pulled away slightly. "If this is just desire, Sophia, it will hurt more than before. It's not just desire. But even if it were, why not allow yourself to? Why keep denying what's screaming inside us?" William looked at her with burning eyes. Part of him wanted to run away. The other part had already surrendered. "If I give myself up, I won't go back, me either." And so, without further words, they kissed again with even more intensity, more urgently, as if the bodies were trying to make up for lost time. The hands became trails. The whispers turned to sighs, the hearts of both. One rhythm. They didn't go any further that night, but they had come far enough to know that nothing would ever be the same again. And when Sophia left hours later, William was left standing on the porch. The chest is agitated. The mind is at war, because deep down, he knew the kiss had changed everything. But neither he nor she were prepared for what that kiss had awakened. That was the night. Revenge fell silent. And love, even though still suspicious, spoke louder. But can two wounded hearts start over from scratch? Or would the forbidden kiss just be the gateway to new pain? The days after the kiss were strangely silent. Neither Sophia nor William touched on the subject. There were no promises, no demands, no questions like, "What are we now?" But there was something lingering between them, like a too sweet perfume that lingers in the air long after the presence has departed. They saw each other often. They exchanged messages, dinners, knowing glances. but there was something contained in the gestures, as if, after the moment their bodies joined, their hearts had hidden, in fear of what that meant. And then the crisis came. It was an ordinary afternoon. William had just left a meeting when he received a call from his lawyer. On the other end of the line, news that hit him like a punch in the gut. A former partner, whom he had helped in the company's early days, was suing the company and William himself for breach of contract and concealment of profits, false accusation, serious, humiliating, and worse, public. The following week, newspapers exploited the case with sensationalist headlines. Even without proof, the mere suggestion of guilt was enough for his name to begin to be scratched. Competitors were taking advantage. Investors were pulling back. And what he had built with sweat was beginning to be threatened by lies. William went into war mode. He cancelled events. He locked himself in meetings. He slept poorly. He ate less. That calm and seductive man gave way to a cold, exhausted, impenetrable version. And Sophia? He stayed outside. She tried to get closer. He sent messages. He called. He stopped by the company, but William did not respond. He walked away like someone carrying a weight that no one else could bear, until one night she went to his apartment. He opened the door with a haggard expression, dark circles under his eyes, and a tense body. "What are you doing here, Sophia?" "Trying to remind you that you are not alone." He looked away. "I can't be distracted now. I can't pay attention to you. I'm not asking for attention. I'm offering support." "I don't need support," he replied gruffly. "I need focus. And you throw me off balance." That hurt, but she took a deep breath. "Then let me be part of the solution, not the problem." "You were never part of my solution, Sophia," he blurted out without thinking. "When I needed you, you left me. And now why do you want to be here?" "Guilt, regret." She was silent. That was unfair, but understandable. "I'm here because I love you," she said firmly. "And it's not your success that attracts me. It's your soul, even wounded, even tired, even difficult to access." He looked at her. For a second, the wall seemed to crack. "I don't know how to love in the midst of chaos," he confessed. "I learned to shield myself, to not need anyone, to solve everything on my own. That's not strength, William. It's survival. But what if this time you didn't need to survive? What if we tried to live?" There was silence, long, painful, real. "What if you abandoned me again?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "What if I let myself feel, and you change your mind?" "Then it will hurt," she said, her eyes welling up. "But at least the pain will be real, not the dull ache of someone who lives running away from their feelings." He took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can trust." "Then let me earn your trust, one day at a time. No rush, no guarantees." But with truth, he lowered his eyes. "What if I fall? I'll lift you up. What if I make a mistake? I listen to you. What if I get lost? I'm looking for you." His tears fell for the first time, suffering, shortly, as if, in that moment, the weight of all the years of unresolved issues finally found a way out. Sophia approached, just hugged him, firm, present, and he allowed himself to be hugged. From that night on, something changed. William didn't solve his problems. Overnight, the crisis continued. The newspapers still speculated. Lawyers still fought behind the scenes, but he was no longer alone. Sophia was beside him, silent, but present, sometimes just making coffee. Other times, listening in silence as he vented, but always there, and it was there, in the midst of chaos, that they truly found each other. As glamour, no. Plans, only with what really matters, the willingness to fight together. One night, when he was feeling particularly exhausted, William looked at her, sitting on the sofa with her feet crossed, reading one of his business books, and said, "I never imagined that one day, trusting you would be possible. And now?" she asked without taking her eyes off the page. He smiled slightly. "Now, I can no longer imagine." Not trusting, she looked at him, and I knew. That was more than forgiveness, it was love. Matured, chosen, not. The kind of love that is born of enchantment, but what survives disenchantment. And flourishes anyway. And as life continued to test them both, only one certainty grew between them. Only those who renounce pride are able to touch what is true. But was their love already strong enough? to withstand the next challenge? The storm passed, not suddenly, nor without leaving a mark, but like all pain that teaches, it left something precious in its place. Clarity. William won the case. It wasn't easy. Justice was slow, the headlines unfair, the judgments rushed. But the truth prevailed. His name was cleared, his reputation restored. The former partner, unmasked, lost more than credibility. He lost the respect of those who truly mattered. But in that moment of victory, when the phone rang with the official news of the favorable ruling, William did not smile. He just looked out the window, where the day was beginning to break, and thought about Sophia. She slept on the living room sofa, wrapped in a blanket, a book half open on her chest. There was a soft crease between her eyebrows, as if even in her dreams she still carried some wakefulness for him. William approached. Silently, he knelt down beside her and he just stared. She was there, and it had been there. Through the entire storm, no demands, no contracts, no conditions, only with an open heart, and he finally understood. Later that morning, as they were having coffee together, he took her hand across the table and said, "You forgave me first, didn't you?" She frowned, not understanding. "You forgave me for not trusting me, for doubting that I could ever be enough. You forgave me before I deserved it." Sophia smiled shyly. "Maybe I just realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move on. And I chose you, William, with everything you are, with everything we've been and can still be." He squeezed her hand more firmly. "And I choose you too, not like someone starting over, but like someone who decides to continue even after everything." It was there, in that small sunlit kitchen, without witnesses, without a party, without applause, that the love between them became official. Not with alliances, but with surrender, not with ceremonies, but with presence, not with empty promises, but with real willingness. Life resumed its course, but not as before. They decided to move to another city. William sold part of the company, keeping only what was necessary. He no longer wanted to live to work. Wanted to work to live, and above all to love. They bought a simple house, with a garden in the back, a porch with a hammock and a small studio for her to paint. Yes, paint, because Sophia, free from the shackles of the world that suffocated her, rediscovered her old passion for painting, and William, every day, made a point of encouraging her. They reinvented themselves, as a couple, as individuals, like soulmates, who only fully recognized each other. After the fall, there were difficult days, silly arguments, old insecurities, remnants of what hurt too much to be completely forgotten. But now, there was room to talk, to apologize without fear, to keep quiet without the other person interpreting it as abandonment. And there were also intense moments, of easy laughter, of long kisses, of nights when love seemed to want to make up for every moment they spent apart. In those moments, the world disappeared, and there were only them. William, his hands steady and his gaze now full of tenderness. Sophia, with her body surrendered and her heart finally light. One night, as they lay under the open sky, she said, "I was afraid I would never deserve you again." He looked at her seriously and replied, "I was the one who was afraid I would never see you as you really are, but today I see no filters and I love you even more." She smiled with teary eyes. "Do you think we deserve this happy ending?" He didn't hesitate. "No, we don't deserve it. We chose." The love between them was no longer adolescent. It wasn't made of promises or impulses. It was made of construction, of royal forgiveness, of renunciation of pride, daily presence. They learned that love is not easy, it's hard work, but it's also what gives meaning to everything, and that's how, little by little, they became what they seemed destined to be from the beginning. From the other, not as salvation but as company, not as an escape but as a home. Years later, in a special interview about overcoming and success, William was asked, "What was your greatest achievement?" He smiled. He didn't talk about the company, not even the prizes nor a fortune. It was relearning to love someone who once hurt me, and discover that sometimes the most wounded heart is the one that knows how to heal the most. Sophia, watching the interview on television, smiled with tears in her eyes because she knew knew his forgiveness was not an easy gift. It was a crossing. Deep dive into the soul, and she had been brave enough to wait on the other side. Today, if you saw them walking together, you might not realize that they were once two strangers at war. Two proud men, too broken, would just see an ordinary couple who laughs at silly jokes, that is touched with tenderness, who fights sometimes, but makes up the same day. And maybe you didn't even imagine that this love was born from deep pain, but deep down, those who rise from the ashes always shine in a different way. William learned that true power is not in winning, but in forgiving. Sophia understood that love, when it is real, does not bend to time or pride. They were reborn not because they forgot the past, but because they chose to look at each other with new eyes. Eyes that know how to recognize the soul, even after the pain, and perhaps that is the greatest form of courage, because in the end, what unites us are not perfect stories. It's the imperfections we choose to accept. And love, what about you? Have you ever had to forgive to truly love? If this story touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments. Where are you hearing this message from? Your support is what allows us to continue bringing you stories like this, stories about love, pain, and new beginnings.